Joining us now, American-Israeli peace activist Gershon Baskin. He is the Middle East Director for International Communities Organization, as well as a former advisor to both the Israeli, Palestinian, and international prime ministers on Middle East peace processes. You have close ties, sir, with Hamas. I appreciate you joining us this morning, and I understand you sent a letter to those at the top of this group with a proposal for a deal when they said they would support. What are the terms you proposed?
Well, it's a very simple deal. It's ending the war, Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, Hamas releasing all the remaining 101 Israeli hostages, and an agreed upon a list and number of Palestinian prisoners that would be released from Israeli jails. And all of this would happen in 3 weeks. Now, Hamas has indicated that their leadership agrees to it. They will not announce it on their own, and I have appealed to the White House, to the Israeli government, to the Qataris, and to the Egyptians to ask Hamas if this is a deal that they will accept. Because no one should take my word for it. I don't represent Hamas, and I'm not a government spokesperson in Israel. I'm not a member of the negotiating team. But if there's a slightest chance that Hamas might say yes to this, then it's the responsibility of the Israeli negotiators to bring this before the government of Israel and the people of Israel. I just want to correct one thing. It's not tens of thousands who have rallied in Israel. It's hundreds of thousands. To put that in terms that Americans can grasp, if these were demonstrations taking place in the United States, we'd be talking about 25 million Americans on the streets. That's the dimension of the call in Israel for a deal to be made now that will return all of the Israeli hostages.
That perspective important. And although you may not be in the negotiating table, you are in talks with those who are. How does the deal you're proposing differ from the current deal on the table that seems to be at an impasse?
Right, the deal is an impasse that's been negotiated now for about 3 months because it's a bad deal. It talks about 3 phases. They've been negotiating mostly the first phase, which is 42 days long, 6 weeks, during which time 32 Israeli hostages would be released. Hamas is convinced that Israel would renew the war on day 43. President Biden seemed to indicate that if they begin a 6-week ceasefire, it would continue. But Prime Minister Netanyahu said, no, that's not true. They are not obligated to continue that agreement. And we don't know what the fate of the additional hostages would be. So I think that any deal that's talking about taking place over months and the war continuing is a bad deal. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they haven't been able to close the deal. They need to put something that's much better on the table that answers what both sides want. Israel wants the return of the hostages. Hamas wants an end to the war. There's no doubt that we're going to have to deal with the politics of all this on the day after, because Hamas staying in power in Gaza is not a good start for rebuilding Gaza. No one will put $1 into rebuilding Gaza if Hamas is in control there. But that needs a political solution that can be done in the region between Israel and its Palestinian neighbors and the other Arab countries.
Meantime, you heard the conversation I just had with our correspondent that Hamas is threatening to kill more hostages if Netanyahu does not agree to a deal. Can you shed any more intel to that situation and the ongoing threat?
Yeah, it's even more severe than that. Hamas has said that if there are Israeli military operations aimed at rescuing hostages, the moment that Israeli soldiers come close to where the hostages are being kept, they will be executed, as we saw happen this past weekend with 6 Israeli hostages who have very much become symbols of the hostage families. They're the pictures we see all around the countries of all the hostages, but in particular, several of these who were executed over the weekend have really been the pictures that we see every day and hear their families. And now Hamas is saying if there are military rescue operations, we will execute the hostages. I would take it even one step further and say that if Israel attempts to execute the Hamas leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, that it's very likely that the Hamas soldiers who are holding Israeli hostages are likely to execute all of them as well. So there are limitations to the use of power and force that Israel needs to take into account now. There is only one way to bring all the hostages home, and that's through a negotiated agreement.
A delicate step through a very complicated process. Gershon, I know you have your finger on the pulse and you're in touch with those in these talks. We'll stay in touch with you, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.